I thought no one heard it.
We just started recording. So our way has not been to quote lines out of context, but this is just so, it struck me as so beautiful, and we'll see relates to some of the themes we'll be speaking about. So the verse is, my heart is indicting. This is the Geneva Bible, which is my preference. My heart is, as you'll see why, my heart is indicting a good matter. I speak of the things which I have made touching the king. Really what I wanted to focus on is the last four words in Hebrew, Lishoni et sofer mahir. The translators have a problem here because they don't know how to translate the word mahir. So the Geneva Bible is going for ready. There are many other possible connotations, which all are interesting. Geneva here makes us think of, my tongue is the pen of a ready writer. I'm ready to write, which is so interesting for David. What is he in fact writing? And really just, that's the title, reading the book, writing himself. He's writing himself. Now, one of the medieval commentators, Rav David Kimchi, says that the Psalms 38, 39, and 40 should be read together. And they do in a way, they definitely have they seem to be telling a story. And I just want to start with, again, some psukim, some verses from 38 and 39 to prepare us for the continuation of the story in 40, okay? And I think we'll probably just satisfy ourselves with the English here. My wounds stink. They fester because of my foolishness. I am troubled. I am bowed down greatly. I go mourning all the day long. The Hebrew is better. The Hebrew is better right over here. Na'aviti shachoti. I am troubled and I am bound down. And what you don't get in English is the shachat is also a name for hell, right? So whatever he's describing here physically is also a kind of metaphysical reality. That's why the words of the psalmist are so hard to translate, because Hebrew, unlike Hebrew and English are opposite languages. English is a word for everything. So that's why it's a great language. Hebrew is a language for very few things. That's why it's a great language, because it is able to do so much. And as we've been talking about, our dictionary for these words is the Tanakh itself, right? I mean, then when we all become experts on all the Old Testament, then we'll really know how to read. Next one, but I, like a deaf man, hear not. Vanika cheresh lo eshma. I do not hear. V'che'ilim lo yiftach piv. And like a dumb man, like a mute, that does not open his mouth. I'm thinking that I just remembered that there is a Gemara that talks about how to evaluate damages. It monetizes, it gives numbers to loss of limb, which seems asymmetrical to us, but nonetheless, the Gemara does that. And it details the payment that one has to make for various injuries. An injury to the eye is X amount of money, but the injury to the ear is the worth of the whole person if he were in the slave market. Okay? Now, again, we're not getting into how they're measuring things, but the Talmud there, the rabbis there are saying a person is defined by their hearing. That's how we define a person. And here David is saying, I neither hear nor speak. And at the end of that psalm, actually it's the next psalm, in the following psalm, David says, or well, let's actually do 39:10 first. Ne'alamti lo eftach biki ata asiti. And this is a pretty mind-blowing verse. This is in the context of David being pursued by all of his enemies, and he's complaining to God, please save me. And his pleas are more and more and more desperate. And at a certain point, he understands, oh, you did all this. all these people who are pursuing me, all the enemies who did this, all the suffering that I'm undergoing, you caused it. Rabbi Soloveitchik says that when, he always talks about how when Aaron's son dies, the Torah says that he was silent. And Rabbi Soloveitchik looks at his great Stoic thinker. It says this is the response to evil, silence. This is the response to the Holocaust, silence, right? Right. So, I mean, we'll see in a second. I mean, David's Psalms are asking the question of what literary critics call theodicy. Theodicy, how would we say that in Talmudic terms? Shem Varala, Tov Varala, somebody who's good, who suffers. Why do good people suffer? And David is asking that, and to that he has nothing to say. In the previous verse, this is the end of that psalm. David says to God, Hasham mimeni, look away from me. Va'avliga, this is hard to translate, that I may recover, that I may shine. V'terem elech ve'eneni. I mean, whatever's going on here is not a happy ending. David says, like, in order for me to even exist, you have to go, stop looking at me, right? The despair that David feels is so intense. And at the end of this verse, he says, before I leave and am nothing. So it's almost like David is going into a kind of non-being, right? Or that's what and he enacts that. We see his bones being crushed, we see his flesh being eaten. He kind of disintegrates. And by the end of 39, we find ourselves with David asserting almost his non-being. Now, I think the question that the psalmist in general is asking is the question of theodicy. And the question of theodicy is, let's just look at, I wanted to quote Milton because I have my rabbi from Long Island, Rabbi Block, who just made Aliyah, is here. And he would always invite me to his Shabbos table and ask me to talk Milton. And I never would on Shabbos, but now I'm doing it. So we'll see that Milton is really the person who is thinking about, is there a response to terror other than silence? So Adam asks Raphael here, they're having a conversation. This is Milton's midrash on what happens in the Garden of Eden. And Adam asks the angel Raphael to tell my prehistory, like what's happened in the past. And Raphael answers like this. Raphael is a figure he's a figure for the poet. He's a figure for Milton himself, right? Milton here is talking. High matter thou enjoinest me, O prime of men, sad task and hard. This is the end of Hamlet, by the way, Ed, right? Sad task and hard. For how shall I relate to human sense the invisible exploits of warring spirits? How without remorse the ruin of so many glorious ones and perfect while they stood? How last unfold the secrets of another world, perhaps not lawful to reveal. We've always said of Milton that he is the poet with the most chutzpah, but also the most humility. The humility says to Milton, be silent, because it's too risky. How is it too risky? You're trying to put into words something that's invisible. Let's read it again. For how shall I relate to human sense the invisible exploits of warring spirits? How do I put into words something that goes beyond words? How do I put into words something that's sublime without betraying it? This is the mission of the poet. This is why Milton, in some ways, is the greatest poet in the English tradition. because, including Shakespeare, because he feels that humility, but he also feels responsibility to teach. And no matter how much the humility tells him not to do it, not to try to represent the divine, his mission to teach goes further. And that's, by the way, any Milton is here, shot in Milton. Meaning that sense of responsibility. I am responsible for you as a reader. David does the same thing. Okay. I say we take like a 35-second break so I can take some water and coffee, yeah? One of the things that pedagogues have learned from COVID is that you're allowed to do this, you know? You're allowed to stop in the middle of class. I did that last semester. The students were like, oh, that, you know, that's really good. Because sitting still and concentrating for a long time is hard. Okay. We'll read it together. And we'll, of course, be reading in English, and we'll go to the Hebrew when we feel we need to. I waited patiently for the Lord. Kava kiviti. That's this intensification here. I waited. This translator wants to say, the translator saying patiently, which I think is not, I don't know how you translate this, but I don't think patiently does it. It slows things down when in fact the Hebrew is kiviti, right? I'm waiting, God, right? I'm not being patient. Hashem, v'yat elai v'yishma shavati. And he inclined to me and heard my cry. Now we, just having read a little bit of 38 and 39, something has happened here. It's almost, and we'll see, it's almost a yesh miyayin. He heard my cry, he listened. V'ya'alenu mibor sha'on. And he brought me out of the gruesome pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock and established my footsteps. My graduate student, Ed, suggested like this is like almost like a primal scene of David emerging out of the primal muck, right? He brought me out of the gruesome pit, out of the miry clay. He lifted him up, he made him human. V'yitain befi shir chadash. And he put in my mouth a new song, thank God, right? This is the thank God moment. Last night was unbearable. I couldn't survive it, but God gave me a new song in the morning. Tehillah le'Elokeinu. You see, he expands it here, right? David is always thinking about his audience as well. Tehillah le'Elokeinu, I'm including you. Yiru rabim v'yira'u v'yivdechu b'Hashem. Sorry, and he has put a new song in my mouth. Tehillah le'Elokeinu, a praise to our God. Many shall see and fear and shall trust in the Lord. So the first thing is seeing, then fearing, and then trusting. Just out of curiosity, anybody here, what is the connection between seeing and fearing? Anybody?
It's the gap between the unknowing and then knowing the revealed truth.
Okay. So somehow when I see something that's true, that makes me afraid. Why would the truth make me afraid? Yeah, I mean, you can kind of feel people have this like realization of a reality that they had not acknowledged in the past, and then they see it, and that creates fear. So this creates fear. You know, we like thinking about the love of God, fear of God. It's harder for us. It Doesn't sound thought through enough. But here, so there's seeing, fearing, and then trusting. And the psalm continues. Ashrei hagever, happy is the man asher sam Hashem mivtacho. Blessed is the man that makes God the thing in which he trusts. V'lo pana al rahavim uvasate kazav. So blessed is the man that turns God, he trusts in God. And looks not to the proud. A better translation, which both I think the Geneva Bible uses and Robert Alter, a contemporary translation, is idols, right? It's not just proud people. You're turning towards idols. Now, of course, actually, we understand now that because the world has this, the word has this ambivalence, right, or ambiguity, much rather, that trusting in arrogant people is a form of idolatry. Believing in the agency of certain human things and not allowing for the infinite, that is a kind of idolatry. When I look at people and you see I am controlling the world, and not only Vladimir Putin, right? Not just that, I mean that. But when affiliations to other people make it impossible to think, I mean, I was going to say to see objectively, but I forbid my students from saying the word objective, just to see with clarity. Don't trust in these things. These last two words, satik hazahav, is this a literal translation, or is it kazav? Does that mean also crooked people? People who know Hebrew well?
Kazav is like a lie, no?
Okay, no, I'm just wondering if it's more literal, if there's something more literal that I'm missing. Okay, well that's even less literal. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, so there's either trusting in God, or there is this turning aside to lies. We've seen, I mean, we saw how important it is in Psalms. God is upright and David is upright. Now, when you turn aside, and we said the uprightness or the straightness, there is a correspondence between the mind of God and the mind of man. That if you think clearly, then you will be able to connect to the divine. I mean, I know it's a hermeneutic circle, right? I know that. But if you get turned away, you can't see anymore. If you get turned towards one set of people to a set of idols, the idolatry of the social. And here's David's Milton moment. Rabot asita, ata Hashem Elokai. God, my God. We notice again the juxtaposition of the eternal and the personal. Niflotecha umachshavotecha eleinu. Many, O Lord, my God, are thy wondrous works which thou hast done, and thy thoughts which are towards us. That's the eleinu there. Ein arich alecha. There is no order in front of you. Let's continue. Agida vidabera atzmu misaper. I didn't read that great. We could spend the rest of the time reading this, or I want to do that, and just thinking about the complexity of this verse. What a challenge to translate this here. How to translate this. I mean, there's so much involved here. Let's go first step by step. You made great things, and they're wonders and thoughts. Your wonders and your thoughts. The created world, right? And your thoughts, how do we know God's thoughts? Through revelation, right? And through revelation. And we have no way of putting them in categories. I just think of like the philosopher John Locke, who wanted to put everything in neat categories, right? And the psalmist here is saying, whatever categories you have, the infinite will escape it. The world will escape it. God's thoughts will escape it. Again, and this is Milton's problem. Remember, Milton says, how can I tell these things which are perhaps not lawful to reveal? And not only that, how can I tell, and the reason they're not lawful to reveal is because you're going to get it wrong. And there's this thing, and there's this humility that Milton feels. I have this responsibility of, again, teaching. And David feels that as well. Let's see how he continues. All of these things we can relate to. Agida v'dabera atzmo misaper. I mean, I'll read their translation. If I would declare and speak of them, they are more than can be numbered. So the simple shot of this is it's impossible to with words capture the infinite. But the translator here puts in this conditional clause. For people who know Hebrew, let's just look at this quickly, right? There's no conditional here, is there? Right? That's a decision the translator made to make it conditional. Let's see, we'll look at some other translations this is from the Geneva Bible, and this is we'll read one from the Geneva Bible and one from the King James Bible. And then we will have a Twitter survey about which one we like best, okay? Oh Lord my God. Can you see this? It's not big enough here. O Lord my God, thou hast made thy wonderful works so many that none can count in order to see thy thoughts toward us. I would declare and speak of them, but they are more than I am able to express. See how beautiful this is and clear? It's like it was written in 1560, right? It's like so contemporary. I used to think that the King James Bible was the great achievement of the Renaissance, but aside from Shakespeare, Milton, but Geneva you feel the spirit of Protestantism. Geneva was Shakespeare's Bible, right? King James comes after. King James is in 1611. Shakespeare writes most of his plays beforehand. So anything Shakespeare is getting from the Bible is from the Geneva Bible. Let's read King James. You can already feel it's more formal. Are thy wonderful works which thou hast done, and thy thoughts which are usward, right? That's something that Geneva would never do. They cannot be reckoned up in order unto thee. If I were to declare and speak of them, they are more than can be numbered. So the King James puts in the if. How does the Geneva deal with it? I mean, the state, it's demanding an if, right? Because we see King James and this translation we're using, Koran, both put in the if. How does Geneva get out of it? What? Yeah, Ronnie? No? Let's go back to the Hebrew. I think that's why it's challenging for us, because we're not seeing both at the same time. And let's go back to the Hebrew. Rabot asita ata Hashem Elokai niflotecha makfotecha eleinu ve'ein orach elecha. We have no system to describe you. Elecha. Agida v'dabra atzmu. I will speak and I will tell of the greatness of misaper, and that's where the counting things, reckoning, numbering. Siper is, of course, to speak and to tell. So there's no, I can't see anybody. Just 1 second. I want to just see if I can see you guys again. I feel like I'm talking to myself. Can't do that. Where are you people? Come out wherever you are. Has that ever happened to you? Everybody vanishes on Zoom. Oh, there you are. Good. Okay. Panic over. So there's no condition here. I speak of you and I tell of your greatness, meaning it kind of needs the if or the would I would be able to, then I could. But at the very moment, it's not at the very moment that David is saying, I can't really describe the divine. But of course, what's he doing? The whole activity of what he's doing, he's the first Milton. I can't go on. I must go on, right? And then he goes on. Thou dost not desire sacrifice or meal offering. Thou hast dug open my ears. Now, this is another weird one. Thou hast dug open my ears as naim karita. So very quickly, let's see how these guys did it. My ears you have opened. That's Geneva. I think King James is my ears thou hast opened. So our Hebrew is going not with that, it's going with, what are they saying? Thou hast dug, it's more literal. That's good because there is that literal aspect. So tell me, how do we understand this? Why is, it's a weird metaphor, even for the Psalms. I don't think it occurs like this again. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, the first thing that's being said is, God doesn't want temple offerings. Right, it's interesting. You don't want sacrifice or meal offering, burnt offering and sin offering are not required. What is thus thou hast dug that might open my ears? What does that have to do with the rest of the sentence? It's kind of stuck between the sacrifices. It's really great to look at either good translations or the Hebrew just to see the graphic nature of things. So you do have these ears that are being opened in the middle of the sacrifices. This is David's plea to an individual voice. I mean, I'm saying this now. We have to read the next stanza. We'll read the next stanza, and then we'll see. I'll talk more about that. Az amarti, hanivati, b'megillat sefer katuv alai. I wish I had read this line when I was like in 11th grade. It would have changed my life, you know? It's just like, so we have problems here in translation. Thus I said, here I have come, the Megillat Sefer Katuv Alai. First of all, what is a Megillat Sefer? So they're saying the scroll of the book. Let's just, I put this on my sheet. This is from the Geneva Bible. Another great thing about the Geneva Bible is it has lots of footnotes. So it gets to this line and it says meaning of Hebrew uncertain. Meaning they put their cards on the table, right? We don't know what to do with this. So where is it? What are the interpretive problems then? I mean, I think the biggest interpretive problem for me is how do you translate Katuv Alai? I mean, what are our possibilities? We see for me. Anyone?
But alai, it's in me, right? Something like that.
Engraved.
So there's going to be something that's going to push us in the next line to say what you're saying. What?
Speak ליום אחד. אם את רוצה ללכת לפני מה שבא לך.
Are somebody talking to me in Hebrew? No. Yes? I'm just confused by the linguistic shift. Somebody muted themselves. Okay, so there's in me.
יאללה, יום טוב, ביי דניה.
Okay, whoever is on.
ביי חן. מה?
Okay, Alex.
אני 7.5 שעות פה. אני על השעות, אני לא לכם מורחת.
לסגור את המיקרופון שלך, את מפריעה לכל האנשים פה.
Yeah, I muted it. I did it. Fine. So there is, in me will be justified by the next line. La'asot ritzoncha Elokai, chafatzti b'toratcha b'toch ma'ai. I delight to do thy will, to fulfill thy will. oh my God, and your Torah batoch ma'ai. And they're also, it's like, they're not willing to say the current translation is going with heart when it really means innards, right? Really means your insides.
Kishkes.
It's your kishkas, exactly, right? So that justifies, I think, the reading of in me, a lie, of me, write your book on me.
But it's alai la'asot. It's the continuation of that. Alai la'asot retzoncha.
Right. I mean, but wasn't that weird to say that God writes on you? I'm going with that shot. We'll see another shot in the Talmud, but we're going with that shot for a minute. David is coming with his book. Which book is it?
Is the book? No.
All right. So who said that?
Me, Ronnie. Hi.
Yeah, Ronnie. What do you mean by that?
It's like he's the. There's something's happening to him. He's realizing, like, I love how you noticed, how it's like between those like rejection of sacrifices being what God wants. He says, God opens my ears. There's a revelation going on, and you realize it's all inside. It's on me, it's in me. It's like, the tattoo. It's like a tattoo, or it's.
That's good, right? So the digging, right? The digging. I was wondering,
the digging,
right?
The digging is like, I don't know that word well. I don't know where to place.
And I'm going to go with what you're saying. It's kind of like an archaeological thing. I mean, there are other metaphors for the ear that in the Talmud. One is this, like a sieve, but here is this idea that somehow it has to be carved out of you.
It's blocked up. We have that in the Nevi'im, that they complain that our ears are they blocked? Are they fat? Like what's the terms I never want Hidon to know.
Okay, right. So here we're seeing already implicit, I think, here, the importance of hearing. I mean, maybe I'm reading into it, but by the end, I don't think we'll say that. And the writing here is not just God's writing, it's David's writing. David is enacting. See, that's what David is now doing, is David is bringing his book, which is simultaneously his book, God's book, but his book. He is writing his book. That's what we saw in 45:2 above, that the tongue writes. The way you speak, the way you tell your story, that's how you become who you want to become. And where's the vocabulary come from? Megillat Sefer. That's one shot. I like that shot, right? There's another one also, which I think relates to it. We'll look at the Gemara. And they like this one. And we have been talking, let's try to keep the two things in mind, the shot that we just gave about the way in which individual writing or individual voice comes from maybe hearing something from the outside. We have to see if there's hearing is more explicit in this psalm, but God writing on one, and then David himself writing himself. And here we have been talking a little bit about how the Psalms represent David's insecurity about his authority. And we see all the time the Psalms we'll be looking at one reason. We saw another in the Psalms, that people are just constantly trying to undermine him, including all the great people of his generation. And they're saying he's not worthy. And one of the things that they say in order to make this argument is that David committed this great sin. And from their perspective, great sin is not redeemable. As we remember, the rabbis say that David sinned in order to bring tshuva into the world. The reason David he sinned, that's how the rabbis are understanding. Because Shaul and these other people, they don't understand that. They don't believe in tshuva. That's what it comes down to. People will say in yeshiva, don't say such a thing, but yeah, that's what you have to say, because they do not believe that David is redeemable. And David takes it to heart. And it's one thing is his sin with Bathsheba. And the other is that he comes from he has a questionable provenance, right? He comes from Ruth, how do we say it? The Moabite Ruth.
Ruth Moavia.
Ruth, and she is a convert. And of course, the Torah says explicitly, and this is what the rabbis are going to be dealing with, that no person from Moab or no person from Ammon can enter the congregation of Israel. So what's pshat, right? So now the rabbis are going to give different reasons for. Well, the first one is one of the pshatim that in Midrashim about the story of Ruth, Boaz, in order to explain his choice, he's understood to be the head of the Sanhedrin, the head of the legal body. And he says, oh, when the Torah says that, it doesn't mean all Moab, people from Moab. It just means Moabite men. They can't enter the congregation. Moabite women is fine, right? So that's like the fetch that the rabbis do in order to, or Boaz does, in order to understand how is it possible that Ruth comes into Klal Yisrael, and then she becomes the origin of David. So the people in David's community were saying, we know who you are. You're illegitimate, right? You have no legitimacy. You have no power, and you have no legitimacy. You have to really remember this when we read this, just to feel the extent to which David is being attacked on every possible side. So in this here, now in this, we'll read this in English. So Rav is one of the Amoraim, 2nd to 6th century. Rava taught, what is the meaning of that which is written, you have loosened my bands? So as the Midrash or Agadata, that is Midrashim that are found in the Gemara, often does, is it will take a verse from Psalms. One of the reasons I decided to learn Psalms is I wanted to understand Midrash better, because Midrash is, constantly quoting the Psalms. So they quote this line out of context, you have loosened my bands. And David said before the Holy One, blessed be he, master of the universe, you have loosened the two bands. What's the word for Hebrew here? The word in Hebrew here for bands? Patachta l'mosairai. You opened up the things that are constraining me. What are those two bands? And he goes on and says, Ruth the Moabite woman and Naamah the Ammonite woman. Who is Naamah the Ammonite woman? That's Solomon's mother, right? It's interesting here that what's being questioned, or what's being implied is being questioned about David, is not only his provenance, but Solomon's provenance, right? You are, and this means in the dialogue that we're imagining, that those around David are telling him that you're totally illegitimate, not only because of Auto Isha, that woman, right? That woman, but also because the feminine has tainted you throughout your life. It's irredeemable. Next, Rava taught, Rava likes this one, right? What is the meaning of that which is written? Many things have you done, O Lord my God. Your wonders and your thoughts are upon us. Oh, bingo. This is our psalm, right? So we're in good shape here, right? Upon me is not stated, but rather upon us. When it says Eleinu, we saw the translators struggling with that. And here, the drush, the homiletic interpretation is, upon us teaches that Rehoboam, son of Solomon and grandson of David, was sitting on the lap of David, who said to him, these two verses were stated about me and you. As Rehoboam's mother was Naamah the Ammonite. What's happening in this midrash? Why do we have this little family scene here, right? It's David with his grandson. And he says, when this book was written, it was written about us. What's the significance of adding the grandson? Anyone? Danielle?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about, actually, I'm like bringing us all the way back back to Lot's daughters, who like the rabbis tell us are, you know, the Ammonites and the Moabites. And I just feel like there's this like very long generational construct here that points us backwards and then points us into the future with the grandson.
Right. And so we're talking now not just about David, we're talking about David with a mission. What is David as a mission? Is not kingship with a small k, but kingship with a capital K. And that kingship not only goes to Solomon, but it goes to the end of days. That's his mission. Now, Danielle, you mentioned the story with Lot's wives. Why are Lot's wives important in—
I mean daughters, sorry, Lot's daughters.
Lot's daughters. Why are they important in this story? Just give us a little background.
Well, I mean, I'm just, you know, it's like I'm trying to remember, but you know, the two daughters obviously like they sleep with their father in order because they're afraid that all of existence has been wiped out, right? So,
right.
And so
there's this kind of—
You're talking about Noah, not Lot.
No, I'm talking about Lot's
anyway.
daughters.
So there is this taint at the very beginning of Jewish history, which it's incorporated into Jewish history. This tainted version of what might possibly be considered to be outside, it's inside. So let's see, this Gemara, Rava will relate to exactly what we're talking about. Rava also taught, what is the meaning of that which is written? Oh, and this is again our psalm. Then I said, behold, I have come in the scroll of book, it is written about me. I mean, you'll see that this translation is justified by the story that follows. We haven't suggested that yet. This, one more time, let's just read it in Hebrew. Az amarti hine bati b'megillat sefer katuv alai. Amar David said, Ani amarti, let's go back to the English. David said, I had said that I have come only now. My life was created only recently. That's already somebody filling in the blanks. At the time of my birth. But I did not know that it was already written about me in the scroll of a book. I thought my life started today. Young people, I thought everything started right now. Oh, you mean like there is a history? You mean we're part of a history? And not only the sacred history, the Jewish history, but the story of being alive and Jewish in this age. That is, of course, the sacred history, right? There's nothing else. That's all there is, right? And David has this realization. I thought I just came into existence, but I'm actually part of something. Let's continue. I just want to read it in Hebrew. Ani amarti ata bati. I thought I just came now. V'lo yadati. And I didn't know Sheba Megillat Sefer Katuv Alai. And I didn't know that I was already written about. And then the proof text, we'll see why it was good to hear from Danielle. Katuv Alai Hatem, Kativ Hanim Sa'ot Hacha, Kativ, and it's written here, Matzati David Abdi B'Shemen Kachiba Mishchativ. Let's do that in English. So it says there, and there is in Genesis, we'll look at it in a second, it is written, and your two daughters that are found here. Here it is. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, arise, take thy wife and thy two daughters who are here. That's the word hanimsaot, the people, the ones who are here. And then it's put together with a couple of verses, these two words are put together with another verse from Psalms. I have found David, my servant, my servant. I have anointed him with my holy oil. Even back then, David says, even back then, it's hard to find, but if you look close enough, you can find it. What do you find? What is Nimsa among Lot's daughters? David is there already. He's present there.
I'm amazed by it. I'm amazed by it that
What aspect?
I just find, when reading the Lot narrative, I mean, it's tragic. There's like, it's so devastating.
Mm.
And yeah, and I the way that I'm just always amazed when they make all of this happen and bring it all together, that David is there. David's there.
Right. Which is like the tragic, there's no escaping tragedy, it seems. Here, I want to finish as we always do on time, but I want to look at a little bit of the ending. We haven't exhausted that discussion. For innumerable evils have compassed me about. David can't write about the infinite God, but he can write about the innumerable. We'll see, he virtually says infinite in a minute. My iniquities have taken hold upon me so that I am not able to look up. They are more than the hairs of my head. Therefore, my heart fails me. Right? And this word mispar that we saw in relationship to the inability of the poet to represent the divine is now being used to express the inability of the person who is suffering existential pain to express himself. It's impossible. V'libi azavni. And libi does mean, as we see in the Psalms, libi is the place in which spirit and body come together, the heart, and the heart is associated, this spirit and body coming together with language. V'libi azavni. It's like we're fearing, in David's Psalms, never get tricked to think that if there's a resolution in the beginning, like it's going to keep on going in that direction. We started out, remember, he was standing triumphant, everybody was cheering him. Somehow we're back here. Right, that's part of the shit happens school of life, which was founded by David, right? And I mean, and I hate to vulgarize it in that sense. It's partly that, but David, and this is the greatness of David, he continues talking, and he's begging from God, please be pleased, O Lord, to deliver me. O Lord, make haste to help me. That urgency again. Yevshu, let them be ashamed and confounded together, they who seek after my soul to destroy it. They who wish me evil, let them be appalled because of their shame, who say concerning me, that terrible translation, let them be appalled because of their shame. Let's just go to a real translation here, this one we haven't used yet. Let them be abashed and ashamed together that seek after my soul to sweep it away. Let them be turned backward and brought to confusion that delight in my hurt. Let them be appalled by reason of their shame that say unto me, and the word in Hebrew is he'ach, he'ach. We've seen all of the things that David suffers. And one of the greatest things that he suffers is the people who come by with their story and they're saying, you see, we were right. And they look at you, you're outside the story. That's these midrashim are addressing that anxiety, right, that David has. Maybe he's outside of the camp. Maybe he's outside of the story. And that's what you see David here, right? That's, I mean, if you think in Shakespearean terms, like there are always different characters who are plotting. This one plots, this one plots, this one plots. And the winner turns with contempt and says, my story won in the end. And then, so let's go back and just read the last couple of lines. And David says, let all those who seek thee rejoice and be glad in thee. Let such as love thy salvation say continually, thy Lord be magnified. I mean, there is like, how did we get here? That's another question. And then the last line, va'ani oni. If you say it in Ashkenaz, you can hear the difference between the words when I say them. Va'ani oni. Ani, ani. I. Poor. Hebrew, right? Right? It's interesting because we saw at the end of 39, David falling into non-existence. This is not non-existence. It's poverty. Vani avyon, Adonai yakshavli ezrati umifalti ata Elokai al tachar. I find those last two words really chilling. Hurry up. Don't make me wait. There are lots of words for wait. This expresses for waiting. This expresses the most urgency. And I think the reason that we see the emergence of the I here is because David, during this poem, understood his part in a book. And even though he's down and out, he's still an I. And what comes out of this is also part of David's Psalms. This is also part of the Megillat Sefer that each person has. It's not out of the Sefer. That's why Psalms it's very hard for people to read them, because if you read them carefully, they're excruciating. I mean, they're exhilarating, but they're also excruciating. And this, as we said before, David's imperative to keep on singing, to keep on talking. And what comes out of this is that this line here, this too is David's song. This too. I think my mother would have liked this class. Okay, people, listen, thank you very, very much. I'll hang around for questions if people want to hang out.
There's an interesting parallel between David and Saul here, that when Saul loses his right to the kingdom, it's also the pasuk Hine shmoa mizevach tov lakshiv michelev elim, that the listening is more important than the sacrifices.
Well, how does that relate to Saul?
That's what Samuel says to Saul when he doesn't kill the Haftorah from Parshat Zachor.
Cool. Ronnie, you had something to add?
I love, this last line that you were focusing on, Vani ani ve'evyon, and the, and I wrote in the chat, I just saying that I think maybe it's the brokenness or the poverty that he's talking about, which makes him an I, because when you're full, I mean, this is a very whatever, it's just sounds kind of.
We know you're chassid. We know you're chassid, Ronnie.
You are. I am. and I'm a Leonard Cohen junkie. So it's right. It's all that. It's all that here. But like, that's what wakes you up when you're full. There's no space for anything. No space for consciousness. That's Levinas too, right? I mean, it's all that. I don't think I'm reading it in. I mean, I don't know what we're doing, but I think there's that.
I think the Katuv Alai, it's in a way
so amazing.
The Psalms are, Radak says this, it's a book for you and the book is for you and everybody in Israel. Everybody has a book, right? So and every person's life, as we said the first time, in some way is a midrash on this book. The more we know about this book, the more we can be who we are. It's crazy, but that is the truth, because it is the Tehillim are they are the repository, I think, of Jewish philosophy. I think, but also, let's make that's a stronger claim. But the obvious claim is anything having to do with the liturgy, and anything having to do with prayer, anything, right? So everybody has their own Psalms.
Love it. Thank you. I'm gonna go.
Great to see everybody.
Thank you.
Anybody, any further questions?
I just paid to ask, how are you doing?
Can't you tell?
and
I mean, as you can tell, it's complicated.
Yeah, sure. and ask Professor Kramer. Oh, he left, but I wanted to ask him how is he doing, but that's okay.
He's retired. He's walking 7 miles a day.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Beseder.
Beseder Gomor. All right, people, take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.